Welcome, dear friends. Hope you are keeping good health. This is a case of posterior capsular rent with IOL drop. The intraocular lens has dropped into the vitreous cavity. The first surgery was done about 20 days back by a very close friend of mine, and because of the COVID-19, the management has been delayed. My plan is to make a sclerocorneal tunnel, and to make the tunnel, first I am doing this peritomy for about 2 clock hours from 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock, and then this is mild wet field cautery. In this case, my plan is to do a tunnel of 6.5 millimeter, and this is the 6.5 millimeter measurement. Now I take a 15 number Bart Parker blade, and between these 2 points I make this incision. This is about half thickness scleral incision. Now I take a crescent blade and do the tunnel. The incision is about 2.5 millimeter behind the limbus, and this is the sclerocorneal tunnel. We will see later that this tunnel is going to be self-sealing. Even though the vitrectomy has been done, this tunnel will not require any suture, contrary to conventional belief that if we do vitrectomy we have to suture. This is another small peritomy for about 1 clock hour, 9 o'clock to 8 o'clock, and this is 3 millimeter measurement. From limbus 3 millimeter away a point is marked, and now I am going to introduce a 23 gauge trocar. First obliquely for a distance, and then turn and go perpendicularly towards the center of the vitreous cavity, and this is done. One more trocar here at around 11 o'clock, and this trocar is placed at 11 o'clock. Another on is placed at 12:30 o'clock or 1 o'clock. So 3 trocars has been used, and now I'm going to do vitrectomy. And before that, this is a small side port. This may be necessary for various purposes. And now I'm going through the endoillumination probe and the cutter. The cutter is in my right hand and the endoillumination probe is in my left hand, and this is an irrigating contact lens. It neutralizes the dioptric power of the cornea, and we can see the central fundus very clearly. There is white field contact lens also, which is not required in this case. Adequate vitrectomy is done to make the IOL free from any vitreous strand around. And this was, here I took adequate time to do a nice vitrectomy all around. Since this is IOL drop and not nucleus drop, since we are not going to use fragmentome in this case, induction of PVD is not required. Adequate vitrectomy to make the IOL free is more than enough. And now using 400 vacuum, I am lifting the intraocular lens. I have held the haptic with the vacuum, 400 vacuum and 40 flow rate, and now through the rent I bring the haptic in the anterior chamber. At this time I have asked for a forceps and I am waiting for the forceps. Here it is. The haptic is in the anterior chamber, and now the forceps is introduced through the side port that I have made, and now the optic is pushed from behind and the haptic is pulled by the forceps, and thus the intraocular lens is brought in the anterior chamber of the. And now I'm going to remove the trocar at on o'clock. That is not required anymore. Here it is. With the help of a forceps, the trocar at on o'clock is removed. And now the corneoscleral tunnel is opened. This is a 6.5 millimeter corneoscleral tunnel. And now viscoelastic substance is used to fill up the anterior chamber so that when we remove the intraocular lens there is no endothelial damage. And now I take a McPherson's forceps, bring the IOL completely in the anterior chamber, and then hold the IOL with the McPherson's forceps, depress the posterior lip with another instrument, and bring the IOL out. And now using a Sinskey hook, the vitreous strand at 9 o'clock is released, and with the help of a 23 gauge cutter, this vitreous strand is removed. And now we can see that the pupil has become small and we cannot see the capsular support adequately. So I'm making some stab incisions and using iris hooks to retract the pupillary margin. And after retracting the iris, I see that the capsular support is adequate. The area where I had doubt is 11 o'clock, and that area 10 o'clock. That area is fine. Now I fill up the anterior chamber with visco nicely and take a sensor multipiece intraocular lens, and to guide the leading haptic behind the iris I use a Sinskey hook that goes through the side port at 2 o'clock. And now I push the IOL with the help of this trailing haptic, and the leading haptic goes in the sulcus, and the trailing haptic is also placed in the sulcus. And now the iris hooks are removed. This is a stab incision at 5:30 o'clock. I introduce a Simcoe cannula through this and remove the cortex which was there at this area at 10:30 o'clock. Between 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock. At this time I notice some vitreous strands, so I go again with the cutter, remove the vitreous strands. At this time the visco that went behind the IOL is also removed. This is done keeping in mind that retained visco in the vitreous cavity can cause raised intraocular pressure. Friends, our cutters must be sharp. If we just pull the vitreous strands and if the cutter doesn't cut, then there is a chance of retinal tear formation. And now the trocar at 11 o'clock is removed, and then the iris hook at 10 o'clock is removed in this way. And now the trocar, the irrigating trocar, is removed. The area is massaged, and then the conjunctiva is reposited, and a releasable suture is placed to oppose the conjunctiva to the limbus. The trocar can be placed through the conjunctiva, but sometimes the opening may leak, and at that time it becomes difficult to suture the opening if we don't do peritomy. This is moxifloxacin. You can see that the pupil is round now. The IOL is nicely centered, and now the side port is being closed by hydrating corneal stroma, and then the antechamber is nicely formed by BSS, and now we see that there is no leakage of the wound, so I didn't want to suture this wound. This is a very nicely created self-sealing wound with long sclerocorneal tunnel, and though vitrectomy has been done, I didn't suture this wound, contrary to conventional belief that we must suture the wounds if vitrectomy has been done. And this is the final appearance. So the case was nicely done. The patient did well in the postoperative period. Thank you very much for your attention.